some college degrees that people pursue despite it being useless in the current market. Story 1, when I was in music production school, they were literally, as they were teaching it to us, telling us that there wasn't much money in it anymore. Spotify killed it. So I decided to make audiobooks instead, since people still actually pay for those. Edit Thought ID, drop a link to our first one here, instead of over and over again in replies. It just came out a week ago. Thank you to anyone who checks it out. Story 2, sometimes all that matters is having a degree. They teach a lot of soft skills that are valuable to employers. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in theology and now work in healthcare strategy and operations. Technically not very useful degrees, but I found what I learned from them, mainly how to think and structure problems and analyses, to be invaluable in my career. Story 3, just about any college degree is useful in getting a job. Every single time you fill out an application, it asks for your education history. If you have no degree, you are generally behind everyone who does. Story 4, oddly, most of the doctors I know have taken an indirect path of education. One guy is a former shop teacher, master's degree in education, fine arts. Another is a sculptor, bachelor's in fine arts, Italian. Yet another is a genuine maestro and vocalist of some note opera, master's in music. One lady started out industrial arts. Another lady started out as fine arts. Some of the best coders I know have English degrees. Story 5, I think, though, these useless degrees always are needed to some degree. My close friend worked for the government. They just required her to have any degree. My other friend did a gender studies degree and now on her own therapy clinic. Story 6, the idea that you need a particular degree to get a job isn't really true. You can major in social science and work in business. Source me. I know quite a few people who went into consulting from college with a social science or other useless degree. A large part of degrees like this is the ability to synthesize information, which is a very useful skill in the real world. A lot of it is simply having a college degree at all. Of course, some degrees have a more direct relation to careers, engineering, comp sci, etc. It's sort of shitty, but it's more important where you graduated from in a lot of cases. Story 7, the issue is that many people look at undergraduate work as a white-collar trade school. The academicians never designed it that way. College is where you learn a way to attack a subject, analyze it, and think about it. While learning parts of a degree is not a certificate of competence, it is proof that you undertook and completed a long-term project. Engineers and architects still have to get office experience and pass licensing exams. Accountants can work as bookkeepers but don't need degrees to do so. If you want to be a CPA, you have to take additional courses, do a practicum, and take, as I recall, for examinations. I can't speak to computer science stuff. My BA is in art history. Then I went to law school. A couple of my classmates went to medical school. Story 8, honestly, I used to be for the basis of some degrees being useless in job market references. That can be, but after the last few months, we need to make education a priority again. IDC what degree you get. Becoming more educated and being around others becoming more educated is a win for society. Story 9, I work in video games. Nobody cares about degrees. There's lots of folks who have degrees in like biology, but they're gameplay designers. Also, don't go to school for game dev, we don't care. Story 10, I think it's sad for society that college has become a trade school. One of the benefits of a higher education is to create a deeper shared knowledge of our culture, how to engage with difficult material both in and out of the sciences, build critical thinking skills, and explore areas of interest that may not be available in a smaller high school setting. People dismissing useless majors are also dismissing the very knowledge that built this country. From lessons learned in classical literature, to communicating with different perspectives, to research methodologies, to understanding history, to tapping into personal creativity, to drive innovation. Just learning how to critically interpret media would be invaluable to everyone in today's media-saturated environment. I'm a big believer in a liberal arts education. Whether it's an engineer taking comm and lit classes, or art students taking basic programming, math, and physics classes, all knowledge can be valuable. And we shouldn't dismiss or disdain people who choose to pursue something different. Story 11, following professional degrees only based on what the market wants created the tech bros and oligarchs that are the world right now. Something needs to change. Story 12, your degree is not a ticket to wealth. It's merely a growth networking opportunity in becoming a person who will earn great wealth. As a highly promoted fellow working in software, I've seen top-tier devs with teaching degrees, history degrees, and no degrees. One of the quickest promoted guys at my last company had no degree whatsoever, but had taught himself to be a total genius. Societal standards don't matter. You matter. Story 13, the reason we are where we are in our society, at least in the United States, is this idea that the humanities are useless and that the only degrees that are worthwhile are STEM-based. A society needs history, literature, ethics, art, philosophy, etc. in order to have a collective sense of emotional intelligence and empathy instead of focusing on the purely tangible. Story 14 premise is faulty. There's not such thing as a useless degree. Some may have a better or more direct path to a job, but college isn't a vocational school. Story 15, really anything related to IT. The market is extremely saturated all while jobs are being shipped overseas. A lot of new grads left holding the bag. Story 16, don't fall into thinking that any degree is useless. College is not job training. It's education. By graduation, you should be educated, not specialized for one future occupation. Now I do work in roughly the field of my degree, but frankly, very little of what I learned in school relates to what I do now. Moreover, you are not your job. Having a degree should make you an educated person, not a skilled laborer meant for one purpose. That is to say, knowledgeable in recent and ancient history, logic, philosophy. You've created art, you've danced, played a sport, read classical and modern literature, learned to exercise, you've been exposed to the natural sciences, psychology, know how to calibrate a telescope, know how to balance a ledger sheet, and to some extent do your job. Specialization is for insects, where people, you know that one ant where the head is real big and it acts as a door for the ant colony. Don't be that ant, because that ant has one purpose in life, and it's to be a door. Oh, it's a highly important role in the ant colony, but that ant's whole life is dedicated to being a door. Do you really want that for yourself? As I get older, I find myself thinking of my philosophy and critical thinking classes more than any of the computer stuff I studied. Kind of wish I'd minored in philosophy and taken more of those classes. Now, I went through a phase where I felt as though all that stuff was useless, but think I'm older and wiser now, enough to realize the stuff deemed useless was in fact the most important of all. Story 17, have a history degree. I've only ever been offered one job because of it. My physics degree. Tons of offers. I know more people should get history degrees. It may not be great for employment, but it is worth the effort in many other ways. Story 18, photography degree. Absolutely useless. 90 of what I do daily is sales. The other 10 might look like photography. Want to get into photography? Learn sales first. Sell cars, insurance, windows, whatever. Do that for several years to a decade. Watch YouTube and keep up to date on shooting styles and editing tricks while doing sales. Trust me, you or your kid who is thinking about this profession will be better for it. Story 19, in India. We have this degree called EC Electronics Communication Engineering. This is very popular, and it's supposedly tougher and not enough job opportunities in real world. How many electronics jobs can you actually create in India? Very less compared to its population. Yet people flock to it, in spite of very handful of jobs present in the market, and most graduates just end up in IT jobs from it. Story 20, learning for the sake of learning is a positive thing and leads to a well-rounded person. Not everything should be rationalized based on money or what one can earn. As a whole, we're far too caught up in STEM. STEM is important, and I say this as a longtime software engineer. However, given the current state of the use world, I can't help but believe that if we focused more on teaching and learning things like civics, history, and related topics, we would be less likely to have the problems that we are currently dealing with. Story 21, I have a bachelor's in psychology that's considered useless. Also an associate's in computer science that's also useless thanks to AI and work getting offshored. If anyone here knows how to leverage these two degrees together for work, I'd love to hear it. Story 22, there is no useless degree anymore. Almost all white-collar jobs have base-level bachelor's degree requirements. Not having one locks you out a ton of opportunities. There are certainly more valuable degrees, but no degree is completely useless. Story 23, I am tired of a useless idea of degrees. I got my degree in English, got an advanced degree in literature. Most people would consider that useless, unless I was going to be a professor or something. However, the knowledge of grammar and language I gained led me to a career in software engineering. Because as it turns out, computer languages are in fact languages. If you can understand the grammar, everything else is vocabulary. So it translated very well into being able to write instructions that the computer could understand and execute. Also, being able to edit Travis update instructions is very useful. Not to mention being able to explain to business users why the things you're doing are important in complete sentences. And that's not even taking into account the enrichment, experience, and friends made along the way. Point being, college should not be a trade school. It should be about learning how to think critically and embrace who you are, which is what I got out of my useless degrees. So, after 3 decades in software development with only English degrees, I don't think my degrees were useless. In fact, I think I wouldn't be here without them. Story 24 graphic design seems like a risky choice these days. Seems like lots of folks want to let a computer do it instead. This is not what we should be using these tools for. Story 25, assuming all you care about is income, then all college degrees are going to beat out just a HS degree in terms of income. That blue-hair gender studies student is more than likely going to have a higher starting income than someone going into a trade. Not saying going into a trade is bad, because it isn't, but I hate the narrative of college. Trade school is better for money. When I was in high school, the career counselor made a point of explaining that the only possible job for a philosophy major is to be a professor of philosophy, and the only job openings in that field are when an existing professor of philosophy dies. Story 26, what annoys me is the criticism of English majors by right-wingers. I have an English major family member who earns north of $200,000 per year as a bank employee. That person will have 2 pensions coming in retirement in about 7 years. Not a bad outcome for an English major. Story 27, dance. You don't need the degree to get the job. It's all in the audition, and there's a specific amount of time which you are employable starting at 18 to 20, so the time spent on a degree takes away from that employable time. You would be hard-pressed to find a single dancer at the top ballet companies that has a degree in dance. Story 28, fine arts for sure. I have a friend who went for a BA in fine arts, even studied abroad in Italy for it, then ended up working in a pill factory of sorts. She was super depressed and cried a lot at home because of the bad work conditions, pay, and bosses. She ended up quitting and going back to school for an MS degree in mechanical engineering. I hope she gets into animatronics or something. Story 29. There are degrees which have extremely limited career paths and income ceilings, which are frequently scorned as useless in a capitalistic sense. However, there is no such thing as a useless education. Story 30. Anything English or creative writing related is a pretty terrible thing to get into right now due to AI undermining much of the process. I say this as a former English major. It's not that human writers aren't needed, but I think people outside the major fail to see the value of the degree when there's programs that can entirely automate someone's job. There's also a great article that came out in early 2023 called The End of the English Major 2 years ago today. Actually, that does a great job at breaking down the current problems of pursuing a degree in this field. Story 31, my girlfriend is going to college to be a technical writer, but is also minoring in botany. She has an amazing green thumb and can talk for hours on plant growing. Whereas she only views technical writing as a means to an end, I asked her why she wasn't focusing just on botany. She told me there are only a few dozen internships for botanists in the U.S. that only accept the best of the best of the best applicants. The market is also so slim that she'd be lucky to get hired as an underpaid florist unless she went for a PhD. Story 32. I simply can't think of a useless major. If I were pressed, I'd probably say Bachelor's of Business Administration is the most useless degree. And the only reason for that is if you're in a bachelor's program, you probably don't have the real-world experience to put the concepts in a context. And I say that as someone with a minor in business administration to go with my major in economics. This is why credible MBAs require like 5 to 7 years of work experience to get in the door. Ultimately, a degree program gives you a frame for analyzing problems. College isn't trade school. Just like economics trains you in a frame about looking for optimization, gender studies teaches you a frame for group dynamics and how systems influence behavior. English or literature gives you a frame for cultural translation and looking at how different groups interact with different experiences. All of these have value in the working world. Edit, but I'll add, there are a ton of people who are just morons and don't realize that degrees are there to teach you abstract skills to enable you to solve problems independently. They aren't trade schools that exist to teach you how to build a cabinet or how to weld or whatever. I guess JD from a really terrible law school would be up there, since a lot of those grads are just going on to do really terrible paying work like document review. In many cases, a McDonald's fry cook is making the same wage as these lawyers from really awful JD programs, just without the crippling debt load. And here, I'd say the problem is that an awful JD is equipping you with $150,000 in debt with little networking, but the schooling experience still should equip you with good skills. But the people admitted to those schools tested miserably on the LSAT and have terrible undergrad GPAs. So in a lot of cases, they're the people that would have been better off going to a welding trade school in the first place. Story 33, the problem with this analysis is that whether or not your degree is useless in the current market isn't the question, is whether or not your degree will be useless in the market that exists 2 to 4 years from now. And we've demonstrated pretty consistently that we are absolutely at predicting the future. We've become very mean and lacking in empathy as a society. We all have to make certain bets about the future. Walking up to someone who is struggling with a degree in art history and saying, "Guess you should have thought about that before you got that degree," isn't, in my opinion, much different than walking up to a carpenter who got injured or can't find work after the housing market crash and saying, "I guess you shouldn't have become a carpenter," or walking up to someone with a losing lottery ticket and saying, "I guess you should have played the winning numbers." It is all Captain Hindsight and blaming people for stuff that they couldn't have predicted or known. Computer science is still a very marketable skill set now. But I was around in 2002, and I can tell you that I knew a lot of bakers and janitors and waiters with degrees in computer science. We're overcommit to the ideas of rugged individualism and personal responsibility in the context of a very interdependent society and economy, where the reality is that you have control over far, far less than you think you do. Then all sort of cognitive bias kicks in. You're successful, so you publish a memoir talking about how it is all the result of your good decisions. And for the record, I know someone with a degree in art history who has a career she's very proud of, and she's also financially successful. Story 34, all of them that are specifically there, so you don't murder, accidentally kill a bunch of people and/or a government-regulated industry. The whole of human experience and knowledge are at our fingertips. If you want to do it, you can just learn to do it. Want to code, just do it. Want to write a book, just do it. So many things are more about experience, doing less so knowledge, which will come with experience anyway. A prime example, I knew someone who went to a prestigious school to learn to code so they could make their own video games, not work for a developer company, their own from the ground up like the debt. Just do that at your house, no insane debt required. Yet I'm the bad guy for pointing and laughing at their monthly payments on a loan that doesn't go down. Story 35, I have a FB friend that posted his daughter with a studio arts degree was having trouble finding work after the coffee shop she worked at closed. I have a BA in political science. I work IT in the financial world. Story 36, the idea that a degree is solely to be thought of as a ticket into a specific profitable profession is sad. There's so much in this world that needs experts and people with passions that aren't useful from a STEM-only blindness viewpoint. Can nobody learn a thing in depth because it interests them? How empty a life it must be that demands usefulness at every junction. Story 37, philosophy. I have a philosophy degree. Professionally, I've done all right for myself since I graduated 20 years ago, and I use the lessons I've learned in philosophy, largely logic, argument, etc., on a daily basis. The most useless yet useful degree one can get. Story 38, in Canada. At least we've seen an uptick in people taking these types of degrees when the government started funding school. A fool spending someone else's money will spend it foolishly. Story 39, all of them. College is not pre-professional training. It's not learn this major to get job. Want a college for that? Start one, with majors in kissing up, backstabbing, and glad-handing studies. Story 40, ID say a lot of the film TV production degrees. Back when I was at university doing a film and TV production degree, I needed it because I didn't have access to equipment. These days, you can shoot entire film shows on your phone with cheap mics, etc., for practically nothing. And if you don't know the answer to something, you can just Google it. It's a different world now. Story 41, when I went to college, which is crazy to think about it being 10 years ago, everyone was trying to get into the video game development major. When it first was announced my freshman year, when it was finalized into the school's curriculum, it declared a bachelor's of art degree, which is insane when you think about it, because while video game development heavily relies on the science side of things, instead they focused on the design side of things, which is cool. But in reality, it doesn't actually benefit the students because game developers don't really look for design students, especially when none of the design classes are art-centric ones. Everyone and their mother could go, "I want a game to look like X," but to actually do the development of it is another thing. I took 2 courses because it fulfilled my fine arts and one for my business class as well. It was honestly the most useless class I ever took. The fine arts one was just the teacher going on about how teaching video games were the future and violent shooter, etc. games were dead and not going to be popular by the time they graduated. Instead of like designing a game, building it, showcasing it, for example, let's design and build out a board game. Instead, we spent the entire class talking about game theories. I actually want to blast my brains all over the wall because it was really cringy. Then the business one, the teacher was nice. He had business experience and game development experience too. But the students were just ranting about the business practices they disliked, rather than studying why game developers started to lean into battle passes, skins, loot crates, etc., and how to do stuff like video game pitches or run a live games as a service brand. I would talk to the teacher after class, and we both agreed this program sucked because it wasn't really preparing them for anything in the real world that would help them in the job market. But he wasn't allowed to deviate from the course material given to him or change anything in it. So after my sophomore year, I stuck with my Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science, Information Technology, and Information Science degrees since my college allowed students to triple dip in college credits for their degree. You just had to pay an extra $200 for each major to get the degree at the end of it. As for everyone I knew that went to the video game development major, still hasn't gotten a job in their field since graduation. So that was about 25 or so people when I graduated 6 years ago. Most of them ended up working in retail roles. 1 or 2 went into radio, a few went into writing for newspapers, and 1 went into political journalism. But I know a lot of people who went into game development from having a Bachelor's of Science degree. Story 42, some people may see liberal arts, ethnic studies, art history, and communication as useless. However, you can apply these to working as a teacher, clerk, or other career involving public speaking. Teaching would still require a credential in college and MA or PhD. Nevertheless, a major like this could be a stepping stone. Story 43 in Argentina. Journalism. No offense, but if you have no connections to the industry, you ain't getting in for more salt in the wound. This article's titled Journalism and Sociology, the careers with the most regretful among their graduates. Story 44, I'm so tired of seeing posts like this. Your degree doesn't matter. Your experience does. I'm president of a student organization that works with nonprofit and for-profit companies to provide technical solutions. We also publish research with professors in top journals. Here are some things people in the humanities and arts have done for us. Technical writing. They have helped edit and craft papers that have been published. They have also created newsletters read by 200 people. Graphic designers have helped our marketing department create awesome infographics. They have created and designed merch for students. They have designed logos and helped develop high-fidelity prototypes for our website. Someone has to collect funding and write contract for businesses we work with. This is done by a lot of English students. Philosophy and ethics students ensure that research with live subjects follows all ethical guidelines. 99% of people live their life on autopilot and don't do much outside of what society tells them to do. Someone with an English degree that is part of an initiative that creates business value is far more employable than someone with just a degree in computer science and nothing else to show. As a technical person, I can recognize the value that humanities students have created in my organization and am grateful to them. I have never thought of them or their degrees as useless. Story 45, liberal arts. I write creatively, sometimes do voiceover, translate, and technically don't even need a degree. Currently, it's not a requirement to have any degree for all of this. No undergrad degree in translation, at least not in my language pair, or creative writing, where I'm from. I gained my experience from freelancing and actually doing my own research. Ever since I was in my early teens, people go to college to find work and social connections at this point. Story 46, I don't think there's a single person from my uni fine art photography course still practicing, except me. Trash AI photos with 10,000 comments saying amazing underneath give me panic attacks. Story 47, as someone who did go to college to just get a good job. Going to college isn't just about getting employed. The only reason why that is a main focus for almost everybody is because our economy sucks and we can't afford to actually learn what we want. We have to learn to make money if we want to live a decent life. People used to go to college because they actually wanted to learn what they were studying because it was cheap and only a semester. Our current economy doesn't allow that, so it's a different in philosophy of life and economic status. Story 48, the value of a college degree, is that it shows you are able to complete a process. In that sense, there isn't a worthless degree, especially if you learn to think and solve problems. If you want a good ROI, trades at community colleges or medical training, we were able to cash flow our kids' college. Both went to decent public schools. I feel for the kids who come out of a private school with a marginal earning degree and 6 figures in debt. Story 49, you need to add whether or not they have a trust fund. Usually someone who majors in art history. Fine arts is either really foolish or has a family that can support them. Luxury majors like art or gender studies don't really lead anywhere. I believe the failure rate is 98. Story 50, no form of education is useless. The way we structure society and paint intellectual pursuits as only relevant insofar as they can generate an income is broken. Story 51, historically not necessarily useless, but always gets talked down on psychology if you're not going into practice. I have bachelor's and master's degree in community psychology. Something I talk with psych students in general is that unless you go into a practicing psychology, clinical, or counseling, you kind of have to build your own career because there's no such thing as a community psychology factory. Psych teaches you a lot of broad things and helps hone your critical thinking skills. Learning to write an APA format is a skill unto itself that turns you into a powerful written communicator. Develop those soft skills, build your hard skills, and learn how to sell yourself, and you'll be fine. Story 52. I believe I remember reading that the average yearly salary for people in the U.S. with no post-high school education is around $45,000. Subtract that from the average salary of any college degree. And ask yourself if that much of a pay increase is worth tens of thousands in debt. There's your answer. I chose a STEM field, even though it wasn't my first choice for that very reason. Story 53. Psychology, sociology. The idea that they graduate the same number of people in psychology as computer science, and at the same price too, is crazy, but people themselves have to lower the demand for it. Story 54. I think the real answer is any program that lets you design your own degree. Unless you've got those connections already lined up, your individualized, hyper-specific degree program is going to confuse more than it impresses. It's where the whole degree in underwater basket weaving with a minor in ancient Egyptian skater culture meme comes from. Story 55. Doesn't matter what degree you have, as long as it's accredited. Work on your soft skills and be an avid learner in your career. Get to know people on the job and pick their brain. Take an active role in your career. Story 56. I'm not going to come out and say this or that degree is useless. However, you should not be going to a for-profit Christian college known for nursing and engineering requiring six-figure student loans to get a graphic design degree. Story 57. One of the regular commuters I see is an operations manager for a large logistic and fleet company. They have a master's degree in medieval art mainly because they like the pictures instead wanting to do anything within the industry. Rather than the degrees itself, it was the other soft skills they have learned over the years that were more important. Story 58. For reference, I graduated with a BA in 2008, and I work on the CX/UX side of the tech industry. I used to think my English literature degree was useless, and it definitely felt like it was for a long time. Like I used to laugh about my degree and crack jokes about it. My thoughts on this have changed since I originally graduated, though, specifically in regards to my professional pursuits, because both the literal and figurative conceptual, e.g. media literacy, of the general population of the U.S. has steadily declined over the last 15 years. I don't think anyone could have predicted that that would happen, but here we are. So yeah, nowadays, the knowledge that was afforded to me by my college's English program has given me the ability to maintain a distinct advantage over many of my peers with minimal effort. I don't know. It's a weird comeuppance and is one that I'm still adjusting to daily, but it's actually quite fascinating to think about. Story 59. One really great reason to just have the degree may not even be apparent until your mid to late 40s changing careers. You can 1000% be successful without a college degree. However, if you find yourself in your 40s wanting to change careers, maybe law school, getting your MBA, whatever, most reputable graduate programs are completely closed off to you until you get your degree. Story 60. Most degrees are useless other than some STEM. At the same time, in the population sense, not a lot of people have degrees, so they still separate people. It seems like a lot of people have them, but that's probably more a function of being in situations where you're surrounded by college grads. At the end of the day, what you get with undergrad is usually a handheld experience where you can transition from child to young adult. Most college kids don't actually learn anything. They get to experience mild responsibly and mild consequences. You end up paying for proof that you had some exposure to actual life, even if it was not really much of a life experience. Story 61. At this point, it feels that due to degree inflation, all degrees are useless. Particularly liberal arts degrees. Medical degrees are always a good bang for your buck, but even STEM degrees take a couple years and internships to land a solid career. Story 62. It's not about what you have, it's about how you use it. If it's useless to you, then you never should have pursued it in the first place. Figure it out. Story 63. I have a restaurant management degree, and I always thought it was useless because I left that industry. But now I realize it has helped me get my foot in the door to other industries, where I wouldn't be given a chance if not for a higher education. Those soft skills do help. Thanks for this thread. Story 64. OT. I hate the fact that we have minimized education so much that the only reason to get a college degree in a particular field is to get a job. It's so pervasive that even when this isn't the case, it is used to disparage education in general. For example, I have an acquaintance who is getting his PhD in music, and his dissertation is on the tuba. He got interested in music as an undergrad, took up the tuba he had never played before, and then went on to get his master's and now soon PhD. I asked him if he said he was going to teach music, and he said no, specifically tuba, and he had already identified several universities and been networking with facility there for positions in their music departments and concentrating on tuba, the jobs that don't pay as much as an engineering position with an undergraduate degree, but it still is in the six figures. People I have told this story to inevitably sniff and roll their eyes at the very idea that being an academic in an academic field is somehow lesser, even if it leads to an actual paying job. Story 65, a degree proves that you can follow through with a serious, years-long commitment. Most jobs that require a degree don't care what you studied, only that you finished. Story 66, sometimes people pursue education because it interests them. It's unfortunate that public education isn't funded through college in the USA, so it may not be funded at all. Society benefits from its citizens having diverse educational backgrounds. The economy should serve society. Society shouldn't serve economy. America has it so backwards. Story 67, no degree is truly useless. A good few jobs literally only want a degree and don't even care what it is. You manage to get profit, which is a good test in itself. Others you can easily branch out. I studied useless sociology, and because of that base skill set now work in data science data analysis. Story 68, pretty much anything from the extremely liberal-leaning colleges where students can literally make up their own major. I imagine any resumes with those nonsense majors go straight into the trash. Story 69, a lot of my peers want to go to college to pursue acting musical theater degrees. I'm all for chasing your passions, but I feel like spending college money on a degree that probably won't be practical for most generic jobs is kind of a waste. Story 70, when I was in a course for electroencephalogram technician, the teachers would frequently mention that it would be an obsolete position in 10 or so years. Respiratory techs will be the ones responsible for putting on electrodes and getting those readings. Really great feeling, knowing these classes you're paying for are going to be essentially worthless in the future. Other than that, ID-safe photography, everyone and their mother has a high-definition camera these days. Story 71, political science. I used to work with a guy who was working on a degree in political science. I asked him, what can you do with it once you've got it? And he said, nothing. You either follow it up with a degree in journalism and report on politics, or you get a degree in teaching and teach it. Story 72, if you learn to manage your time, communicate effectively, research well, and were exposed to new ideas, it was not a waste of time. It just wasn't specialized job training. Story 73, people often confuse useless with in-demand. Few degrees are truly useless, but there are a lot of degrees job fields where only the top 1% of workers will make a good or great living. For instance, these are made-up numbers to illustrate the idea. Engineering degree holders maybe only need to be in the top 55 of engineers to find gainful employment as an engineer, whereas art history degree holders need to be in the top 15 of art historians to find gainful employment as a historian of art. Story 74. I think it's important to remember that a university degree shouldn't just be focused on becoming a productive part of the economy. There's the intrinsic value of learning as well, and any civilized society needs people who learn and think for its own sake. Story 75. I have a degree in creative writing. The only thing I've used it for is Dungeons and Dragons. It's no useless if the person getting it has the motivation to use it. But that is not me.